Hello, welcome to video 3 in our tutorial lessons, learning C# fundamentals from scratch by myself, Alex Horton. Again, the disclaimers: I am not the best C# developer. I'm not the worst C# developer. If you want to learn in a more formal environment, I would encourage you to do so. What you see in this video is not gospel. You're going to see some things that I do that probably aren't best practiced. I'm sure that hopefully we have a few videos out there or a few comments out there from the previous videos where we've gotten some constructive criticism. Always looking for constructive criticism, nothing tearing anything down. So again, this is used to be more of a fundamentals lesson, series of lessons, and nothing too labor intensive. If you've never been exposed to development work, I would encourage you, or development coding, I would encourage you to get into C#. It's really easy to learn. And once you get all of the syntax kind of under your belt and you learn some of the object-oriented programming fundamentals, it comes really easily. So again, if you want to learn in a classroom environment, please take a class, do so. It's worth the investment. If not, there's tons of videos and tutorials out there on how to learn. So today's lessons, series of lessons, we're going to go over program structure. We're going to go over namespaces, classes. Inside of classes, we have methods and attributes of a class. Main method, that's the starting point for every C# application. Statements and expressions and what they are and what they do, as well as comment lines. And there's comment lines, and then there's the way you can do a boilerplate and that kind of thing. So let's get started, shall we? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our Hello World app, and hopefully you still have a copy of your Hello World app. One thing I will say, however, is I am using Visual Studio 2019. Visual Studio 2019 came out late last week, I believe on either Thursday or Friday or one of the two. I think it's the 5th actually. So I went ahead and downloaded a copy of that Community 2019, and it's really slick. Still works the same way, and there's some enhancements to it, obviously. So I've gone ahead and started Visual Studio 2019, and I'm working in the Hello World app that we had from the last time. So a lot of the material that I'm getting, I will leave a couple of links for you in the video. I'm getting them straight from MSDN. And another great source to get information about C# is a place called Tutorials Point. And this is where I kind of go to for if I need to if there's something I've forgotten or whatever. There's a great way to go over here and look. They have videos and everything else, so I'd encourage you to go over there if you want to. So C#. So the program structure of C# works this way. So in C#, you want to have a bare minimum knowledge base of what you're looking at, so we get down the road, you know what we're talking about. So a C# program has the following parts. The first thing you have is what's called a namespace declaration. What is a namespace declaration? Well, a namespace declaration is something that has types, members, classes, methods, properties, everything's included under that namespace right there. Okay. And basically it would almost, in C#, it would almost be considered to be whatever your solution or your project is over here. So you see this is the project file here, and our namespace is called Hello World app. And you see over here, that's our namespace right here, Hello World app. And if we kind of hover over it, it tells us that's the name of our namespace as well. Underneath there, you have classes. What the heck is a class? Well, a class is a definition of code or a group of code that you can define. What it does is it gives you the all of the fields, the actions, the methods, the variables, everything that you're going to program in code blocks, logic, everything is going to be in a class. Okay. Now, classes allow you to do some really cool things. They allow you to inherit from other classes. They allow you to use polymorphism, which is something that we'll get in. These are fundamentals of object-oriented programming that we'll get into later. You can derive methods and variables and functions and everything else from other classes. So that's what a class does. It's just a group of code that you define, and you can use that code either in its own class or you can inherit from that class into other classes. So for example, this hello world, let's do this. Let's create a new project. We're going to close this project. We're going to create a new project. Okay. We're just going to create a standard class library. C#. We're going to call this one lesson 3 classes. Let's call it lesson 3. And the solution is going to be called lesson 3 apps. We're going to change our location here. I don't know why it doesn't default to my code repository location. And then we'll just say create. Okay. So lesson 3 is going to create a folder under my code repository folder. Now you'll see here, just like I did in the previous videos, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename my class into something that I want it to be. So I'm just going to call it lesson 3. I know I misspelled it, so that's okay. Class, something like that. And then we'll come over here and we'll call this lesson 3 class. Okay. So now we've got a class and a namespace because we've got our project is called lesson 3. Our class is called lesson 3 class. As we go in here, we can see that we've got a class, we've got some XML in here, it tells us what our framework is, and yada, yada, yada. Okay. Don't alter that. So let's save this real quick. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a, again, we're trying to stick to what we're talking about here. We're going to create a method. So we talked about namespaces. We talked about classes a little bit. They're just groups of code. And now we're going to create what's called a method. Now methods, what they are, methods are basically, they are groups of code that serve a specific purpose. They are the workhorses of your program. Okay. They perform specific tasks. Every program in C# has at least one class with a method named main. If you don't have a main method, your C# is not going to work. Now, since this is a class library, we're going to later on inherit stuff from this class library, and we're going to create an application that has a main method in it. So we don't have to use this one as an application method or an application class, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a method. Now, since we're using this as a lesson 3 class, we talked earlier about in a previous video, we have that hello world application that we're running, and we're going to do one of those again. We're going to do another console app, but what we're going to do is we're going to call information from this particular class to work in our other class. So let's make it really simple. What we're going to do is we're going to create a class. We're going to create a class with a method, a void method. Now what a void method is, a void method. Now what a void method is, it's a method, or it's a group of code that is not going to give you back any kind of a type. What do I mean by a type? Well, remember in previous videos we talked about ints and decimals and floats and strings and booleans. Well, those are types in C#. Okay, you can create methods to do a bunch of work for you and return a type for you. That's why what you want to do in a class library is group all of that like code in that class library, and then you just call that class library in your main application, and your class does all the work for you. Your line of code over on your main application is real simple. You might have just one line of code that calls a method, and then it does all the work over there. So we'll make a couple of different methods to kind of get the point across here. So we've got a void method, we've got a string method. And you'll notice as I type these, we'll have a Boolean method. A bool method. You'll notice that as I type these, the void method doesn't have that little red squiggly line under there, but this string and this bool method do. Well, the reason why is because when you type a method, or you create a method that has a type associated with it, you have to return that kind of a type. It's expecting. So when you pass something into, or you call the string method, it's expecting it to pass you back a string. So think of it this way. If I went to the store and I did all my grocery shopping, I put all the stuff in the cart. I put eggs and milk and bacon and all that kind of stuff. You know, everything tastes better with bacon. I put all that stuff in my cart, and I get to the cash register and I give the cashier a $20 bill. What would happen if that cashier took my $20 bill and just looked at me and didn't give me anything back? Well, I'm going to expect something. I'm going to expect some money back, obviously. Otherwise, I'm going to have some hurt feelings, or somebody's going to have some hurt feelings, not only me. So, I would, if you're asking the cashier, if you're giving the cashier money, you're expecting something in return. Probably not explaining this the best way, but this is what I came up with on the short term here. So, and then the other thing is, if I give her a $20 bill in American dollar bills, in United States currency, in the US dollar, if I give her a $20 bill of US dollars, I'm not expecting her to give me euros back. I need her to give me the same kind of money I gave her, right? I don't expect British pounds or Indian rupees or anything like that back, right? I'm expecting to get dollars back. So in this instance, what you want to do, or what it's supposed to do, is return a value to you. So to return values, you just use the return keyword. Return. I'll put that right there for now. So you'll notice that the little red squiggly lines go away because we're giving back an empty string here. Just like with the Boolean value, if I say return false, then it gets the little squiggly lines out of there. Okay. Now, an old friend of mine, he used to always say to me, well, Alex, you're killing me with your method names, right? You're killing me, man. You're killing me, especially with Boolean values, right? I would always make a Boolean value and make the name very confusing. So a little tip here is, if you're creating a Boolean method, make your method names mean something, right? You can't, if you make it like a string method or a Boolean method, you're not going to know eventually, the more code that you get, what it's going to be doing. So whatever you name your method, you want to name it something that means something, right? So let's change it up a little bit here, right? We're going to create this particular application, and we'll stick with the example I gave just a second ago about a grocery store. Okay. So we're going to talk about a grocery store. And what we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves some methods that allow us to do some things in a grocery store that we can call later. Okay. Now, The other thing we're going to talk about are attributes of a class. Okay. What is an attribute? Well, an attribute is basically how that class looks, or how that class reacts, how that class is named, right? Or how that class operates. Attributes can be considered things in a class that give it, give it more of the, this is what this class is for, and that's what that class is for. Okay. So one of the things that you can do with a class attribute is you can create class attributes right inside of your class declaration. Okay. Now, one of the things that we'll talk about later is encapsulation, and that is an object-oriented programming paradigm where you want to make sure that whatever data is stored in this class, that not everybody has access to that particular data. So, for example, an encapsulation uses what are called I'm drawing a blank here. Access modifiers, I should say. Access modifiers, access specifiers, right? And so you'll see here this public keyword here. What that means that if I go through and I create a class, a main method class, I can see this lesson 3 class later on. I can call this lesson 3 class, but you'll notice that I don't have the same access modifier for these 3 methods. What that means is that I won't be able to see these particular classes. I mean, I'll see the class, but I won't see the methods inside of the class. Okay. There's public, there's private. Okay. There's protected. Okay. And then if you don't have one on there, it's automatically going to be a private, I believe. Don't quote me on that one. Okay. So one of the things that you can do, and then there's also static. Okay. So one of the things that you can, we'll talk about those later. And so those modifiers, what they do is they allow you to go ahead and either lock down your code or hide your code, the stuff that is important to keep private, right? So for example, if in here I have data in here that I don't want to be exposed to another class, I can leave it as private. Only this class would be able to see this method in here. Okay. So let's do it this way. I'll make another method, main void. Okay. And in this particular class, I can call a void method, right? If I create another class, which I'm going to do right now, go away. Add, not a new project. Add, I'm clicking on stuff too fast here, y'all. Add a class. And we'll call this class lesson 3 class B. All right. I'll make this class public as well. Now, if I want to see lesson 3 class over here, I need to use a using up here. Using lesson 3, right? Now, if I want to see that other class, I can say lesson 3 class. We see it there. Lesson 3, call it that, equals new lesson 3 class, right? Now, if I want to use this method here, you'll notice when I start typing, oh, you know what? I got to put that into a method. Sorry. Take that, put that up there. Now, if I start typing less 3, which I can use now because I've instantiated a new object of this less than 3 class, and I type, now you'll see I can only see main void, and that is the only function I can see. Because this particular lesson class over here, or this particular class, is the only one that I have exposed to be used by this other class, okay? And what that allows me to do is lock down or encapsulate my logic specifically only to this class. So all of the work is done in this particular class, and I'm just using this class over here. Okay, so that is a method in a class, and attributes of that class can also be the same way. So I can come over here and I can say, let's say, let me think here. Let's say like this, for example, public string, not I'm gonna edit that one out. Public string, here's a good one. Public int, we'll say function type equals 0, something like that, right? Okay. In one of my old jobs, we used to use a function type. What we do is we'd encapsulate a bunch of, or we'd create a bunch of methods in here, and we can pass in that function type, into a method that tells us, hey, we're going to use this one, we're going to use that function, we're going to use that function. We would block code that way. So, but I'm just going to use it this way as an example. We'll say boolean bool, another bool. Let's see, public bool, another bool, and we'll use one, and we'll make this one a private string, and we'll call it lesson string. Okay. Then we'll save this class, and as we come over here again, and since we've instantiated a new object of that class, less 3, we see we've got another bool, function type, and that main void are exposed to this particular instantiated object of that class, but this one isn't, and these aren't. Okay. Now, another thing that you can do is you can inherit, and that's getting into inheritance. I'm trying to leave the object-oriented programming stuff for another time because I'm trying to keep this below 25 to 30 minutes. So again, we have class attributes. We've talked about methods. We've talked about classes and namespace declarations. Let's do another quick app. We're going to add an application. Keep clicking that. Add new item. We're going to make a console. Actually, let's make a new project. Add new project. We're going to make this a console app on the standard.net. C# console.net framework right there. And we're going to call this one lesson 3 application. We'll call it console app. You will notice we're up to 472 for the framework. So create. So we've got our console app. Now, one of the things we can do is we're going to look at, going back over here, our main. Like I said earlier, every C# program has to have a main method. Otherwise, it's not going to start. If I comment out this these lines of code, and I just have a class there, you'll see what's going to happen is if I build this, it says program does not contain a static main suitable for an entry point. It no likey. You have to have a main. Okay. So a lot of times if you're working in form apps or you're working in MVC apps or whatever, the main method will be kind of off on its own. You can put code in there, but never get rid of it. Okay. So that's a main method. Statements and expressions. What are statements and expressions? Well, a statement is basically just a line of code. Okay. A statement is just basically a line of code. So here we go. We've been looking at statements. So this right here is a statement. Statements are basically the actions of your program. Let me rebuild my program, my solution here. They're basically the actions of a program. When you want to do something special in your program, or you want to do a line of code, or you want your code to do something, you got to write a statement. Okay. So there's blocks of code or statement blocks. And those blocks are like we talked about in a previous video. They're designated in between the curly braces here. So everything inside of this curly brace, C# says, hey, I'm going to run that code, right? It says, yep, I'm going to run that code. Okay. And then expressions, what those are expressions are constructed from operators and operands. Operators of an expression tell us which operations that we're going to apply to the operand. And an operator is basically, this is an operator. This is an assignment operator. See the equal sign there? What the equal sign is telling the compiler in C#, it says, hey, I'm going to create a new object with the type of less-than-3 class. I'm going to call it less3. So I'm going to give my new object an identifier of less3. And I want it to be equal to a new object of less-than-3 class. So basically, so think of it this way. If I was going to create a class called grocery cart, right? And that cart is empty. When we're still talking about the grocery cart scenario, I come into the store, the grocery cart is empty. I pull the grocery cart out, right? Let's say every time I come into the store, I'm going to grab a brand new cart. Who goes into a store and grabs a cart full of groceries? Nobody does that. So think of instantiation as you're grabbing a brand new container of whatever it is that you're trying to use. In this instance, I'm using my less-than-3 class, and I'm creating a new container or new class or new object of that class. Everything that I do inside of this new container belongs, or it comes from, this class. That's kind of inheritance, right? And so I'm basically creating a brand new container that I can put stuff into, right? So like we said earlier, I can say less3, and I can say another bool equals false, like that, right? So now another bool can be false. Let's say I want to set it to true. less3, another bool equals true. These, again, are assignment operators. Now there's comparison operators too, right? And you use comparison operators to compare one piece of data to another piece of data. And then you get into conditionals, right? So I'm not going to get into conditionals. We're almost out of time here. Comment lines. Now, comment lines, you can use different types of comment lines. There are single line comment lines. This is a comment line. Now, what a comment line is, it's code that allows you to, or it's basically a literal that allows you to put little messages to yourself or messages to other developers in there. This is what we call a single line comment line. Then there's multi-line comment lines like that, which is basically a /, 2 asterisks, and another ending /. I can type on multiple lines, if I can spell, lines to put more code in here, right? what a lot of people do, they use these kind of comment lines here as what we call boilerplate comment lines. Okay, so like up here, what I can do, or up above here, no, not right there, right there. I can put a boilerplate right here. I'm kind of anal with my spacing here. And I can come in here and I can say, you want to make it look kind of neat, so you can put a little bunch of this here, put a space there, and a bunch of that there. And in between, you just type. You can say project is in 3 apps, and you can say actually the project name on this one is lesson 3 console app, and you can say solution lesson 3 apps, and then you can put the date 04/08/2019. You can say author. You're going to give yourself some credit here, Alex. And you can always put a purpose in here to give an idea to new devs on how to make a boilerplate. And then in there you can put special stuff in there, little messages and stuff. So also, and then the other thing about these kind of comment lines here is you want to save your comment lines for code that is not obvious, right? You know what you're doing here. Anybody that is, knows about development, you don't have to put a comment line for everything, right? So but if you wanted to, you could put something like this. You can put, boom, making a new object of lesson 3 class, and you'd want to put Y because blah blah blah. You don't have to make it too too in depth, right? So again, we've gone over namespace declarations, classes a little bit, some methods and attributes of a class. We talked about statements, which are these here, expressions, and we've talked about comment lines. In the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to continue talking about syntax and data types and some conversions and some other stuff in there. So again, as always, please, if you like the stuff, give a like. If not, you can downvote it if you want to, but please give me a reason why you're downvoting it, and please keep it constructive. I'm looking for constructive kind of criticism. This is all brand new. I've never really done a blog before, so please don't be overly brutal to me. So until next time, God bless, and I hope this finds you well.